Welcome to The Intentional Way, where literally every moment is a step towards purposeful living. I'm Bryan Hatch, here to explore the power of intention with you. Learn from our guests who embody intentionality. I'm glad you're here with me. Let's get started. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of The Intentional Way. Today's guest, I have a lot of history with mentally. I think as you get to know him, if you don't know him, you're going to possibly be fascinated with him as I am. I actually have a Google Doc of Brad-isms that I keep track of because they're just fascinating to me. So this guy is an entrepreneur, successful entrepreneur, driver, mover, shaker. He coaches basketball. He's got an amazing family. Those are just things that you can see on the outside looking in, and there's so much more to him. So without further ado, I want to introduce our guest, Brad Martineau. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. So how did Brad Martineau come to be? Because for me, I literally have known you for, 10 years?
A long enough time.
No, longer than that. 16-ish years. That's when I got to know your family a little bit.
Yep.
So I've known you for a little while, and how did you become who you are? Because I've got all these questions I want to ask you, but I want to start there. And I know that's probably not a short answer, but go.
All right. Well, it reminds me of, so what you'll learn about me is, so I got 5 kids, so everything in my life is viewed through the lens of Disney movies. So the first thing that comes to mind is the scene in Aladdin where the guy's like, come closer at the very beginning, and then smashes his face. He's like, it's too close. So I'm trying to decide the joke to make of, hey, where did Brad come from? Like, all right, well, how far back do we go in this? So 6 to 10 kids growing up, that plays a factor at some point into who I've become. There are some very specific elements of like mindset or thoughts that I had as I was growing up when I was younger that I've since now realized like, oh, that's really a part of who I was. And part of that is being in the middle of a whole bunch of kids and that situation. So 6 to 10 kids growing up, my first real job was at the University of Phoenix Online. That's a whole separate story. Everyone should have a job that they don't love.
There you go.
Because it gives them appreciation for their jobs. We'll leave it at that. And then my next real job was at Keep, back when it was called Infusionsoft. And I was the 6th employee there. Was there for 8 years or something, 9 years. And genuinely, I believe that if they hadn't laid me off when they did their round of layoffs, I'd probably still be there. Which is really interesting because as I look back, I can see, yeah, but maybe not, because there are lots of obvious signs that you have this like entrepreneurial DNA and blood in you. Mm-hmm. But I was about everything that they were about the whole time. And in fact, most of, if not everything that I do now is still sort of in that same vein. But I think that's an interesting and important piece because I really do question whether I would have left if I wasn't like kicked out. And then the process of being an entrepreneur and all of the things that you have to learn and face and do and who you have to become to continue to actually stay as an entrepreneur, that would be this. If you're asking where did Brad Martineau or how did Brad Martineau become Brad Martineau, it would be through that fire or that furnace called entrepreneurship while also having a family. So I'm sure we'll get into some more details, but I'm trying not to have that be like a 20-minute backstory. But the basic summary is unwilling entrepreneur or like unintentional entrepreneur. Like it wasn't intentional that I became an entrepreneur. I didn't wake up or grow up being like, I'm going to start my own business. I had no real concept of it. In fact, at Keep is where I got even introduced to like what an entrepreneur really was, like what small business was. I didn't have any context for it at all. Like really? Zero awareness. It was like, I just work at this place and I make some money and hopefully I can make some more money. And then I left the University of Phoenix and I went there at Keep because my brothers and my brother-in-law were the ones that started it. It sounded cool and I liked software and stuff. And then that kickstarted the whole thing and now here we are.
So Brad, like that's like the shell. Like that's what people could see of you.
Yeah.
Have you always been, okay, so I'll expose a little bit of my thoughts of you. You are incredibly quick thinker, incredibly on it. I feel like when I talk to you, I get more from a conversation with you than a typical person. Maybe that's because I connect with you or maybe there's other factors I'm not thinking of. Has that always been part of your way of being? Like I feel like Brad Martineau has a brand as a human being, has an actual brand. And I wondered if this is all entrepreneurial that I'm getting to see, or is this like, no, I've always been ingrained with, you could outthink your teachers. That's my question, like way back in high school.
So when I mentioned before that I was a 6th of 10 kids and there were things that played into it that I realized later. So one of them is that, but it wasn't that I could outthink my teachers. I didn't think that I outthought my teachers. I thought something was wrong with me.
Oh, really?
And not really wrong with me. Like I know a lot of entrepreneurs talk about that, but there are a lot of things, like I just have just a default, like ingrained in me, and I have no desire to get rid of it, view of the world that is like, I don't really care how you do something if it's stupid. So I don't care how long you've been doing it. I don't care who's doing it. I don't care who said to do it. If it doesn't make sense given the outcome that you're trying to get to, then that's just a stupid thing to do. Well, public school system and growing up, there's a lot of that. And I remember I'm just looking, I'm like, why are we doing this, or why would we do it that way? It doesn't make any sense. And there were enough of those things that I was probably actually wrong. But I remember thinking that a lot, like maybe I must be missing something, because everybody is saying this is how it's supposed to be, or this is the thing that we're going to do. And then as I got into entrepreneurship and started whatever you want to call it, I started to like really observe and be like, no, actually, that might be a gift that you have, is the ability to be like, well, that just doesn't make any sense. So that was always there. And I distinctly remember being like, I think like doubting myself, like I think something's wrong with me. And now I'm just pretty comfortable with it. It's like, well, it's real simple. You just have to be able to justify why you're doing the things that you're doing based on the outcome that you want to get. And if you can't, then that would qualify for me in the category of stupid. And I don't mean stupid like you're dumb.
Yeah.
Although the action, and I put myself in the same boat, right? So it's not like to me like, I'm not trying to put anybody down or an insult. It's just like, well, that's dumb. And we should be able to laugh at the dumb things we do. It's like, well, I say I want this, but I do this. That doesn't line up. It doesn't make any sense. So there was always, that started, so there's two pieces here. One of them is, that started just as like, that doesn't make sense about why we're doing that. I don't understand why, when there's another way we could do it that seems to be way faster or better. And then there's another piece that actually came from my dad. And these two together are probably like the genesis of what you talk about when you say the Brad Martineau brand. And I sort of chuckle. If you guys were watching, I was kind of smiling. So it's like, yeah, there is, but I'm not going to say that out loud. So I love that other people say it.
Yeah.
But it's also not completely unintentional at this point. Initially it was, but now it's like, no, it's actually what I do. And side note, maybe we'll come back to it, but there's something really powerful in life about being like, oh no, that's what I do. And I'm going to lean into it 100% and recognize that there are gifts that have been given, and life's a lot easier when you stop trying to chase other people's gifts or other people's things and be like, no, this is just what I do. So anyway, back on point. So there's this one element of the ingredient, or one ingredient in the recipe was just this idea of like, it seems like there's a better way to do it. And then again, 6 to 10 kids. And I remember this was probably about the time I was 10 or 11. My dad got on this kick where he would ask this question over and over again. And I was like, I don't understand what you're talking about. And the question was, what do we want to have happen here? And I'm like a 10 or 11-year-old. I'm like, dude, that doesn't make any sense. And I have this vivid memory. We're in our garage. We're getting into a Suburban because that's what we had to have all the 10 kids make it. And not legally, by the way, if you do the math, you can't get 10 kids and 2 parents into a Suburban legally. At that time, it was legal, but not anymore. We're going to see the movie Aladdin when it came out.
Okay.
And we in the garage, he'd open up the garage, he's about to back up, and he puts his arm over the back seat, turns around to all, he's like, all right, hey kids, so what do we want to have happen here? And I'm like, what the frick are you talking about? We're going to a movie. Do you know how many times we go to the movie theater? There's 10 kids. We don't go that frequently. It would be dope if we could watch a movie. If we could get popcorn, that'd be a bonus, which I know is not going to happen because there's 10 of us, right? So that was really it. I was just like confused at this whole question. Then as I got older, I was like, that's a really good question. And when you combine this idea of what do we actually want to have happen, not what do we want to do, not where are we going, what is the outcome that we're trying to generate, that we're trying to create, that really crystallizes a super powerful question. Combined with this idea of I don't care what people have told you to do or how long people have been doing it that way, it gave me the rubric or the grading scale by which I would decide if something was stupid or not stupid. And I was like, that just makes sense. And then I just baked it into the way to look at the world. So in every single aspect for me, it's really simple. What are we trying to do? If you can't describe it, then there's no point in coming up with like a plan of action. So for me, and you've probably been on the other end of this, you ask me any question, and what's the first thing I'm going to ask in some way, shape, or form? What are you trying to make happen?
Yeah.
Like, what's the outcome?
Yeah, I've heard that.
What's the outcome you want to get to? What are you trying to do? What, like, do you want this? Do you want this? Do you want this? Because what you're going to do is going to be directly related to what the outcome is that you want, or it ought to be. So those two things both are very much from my childhood. There's a third one that we might get to, but those two together are like at the core of you said you get more when you talk to me than when you do to most people. This is like, I don't think this is unique to me. I think this is just my formula. If you're really clear about what you're trying to do, it means that you'll ignore and drop and cut probably 90% of what you might do. And when you drop 90% of what you might do, there's only 10% left, but you have the entire time you would have had a conversation to only focus on the 10%, which means you can get way more out of whatever you're talking about because you're not having distracting conversations about things that you don't actually care about because it's not actually what you're trying to make happen. So that's one piece of it, is just like, you just get right down to the thing that matters. And then you can spend all your time talking about that.
So are you saying when I've talked to you, it's more you're trying to find out what do we want to talk about and go after that thing or find out what it is. And that's partially why I experience those conversations with you deeper.
That is 100%. If you ever watch me in a conversation with somebody, if you ever see me start to fidget, it's because I'm like, you're having a conversation that doesn't mean anything to anybody. But you feel like you are. And I'm not like, and in the back of my head, I have a really hard time with conversations where one of two things is happening. Either one, they'll be like, hey, we want to talk about this. And then the conversation just like meanders. It's like, hold on. When we started, you said you wanted to talk about this. How are we 4 topics over here already? And it has nothing to do with that. That's one. And then the other one is people say, hey, I want to do this. And then they go have a whole conversation about things that would in no way, shape, or form, even remotely possibly lead to the thing that they want as the outcome. And I'll be like, when are we done? Because I need to go have a conversation with somebody that actually wants to get something done.
This is fascinating to hear because I'm here with you, but I'm also thinking about my interactions with you. And I'm thinking, oh man, the foundation I'm realizing now as you've spoken it is literally what are we trying to do here? And you said it, I'm just repeating it, but I'm also seeing the interactions I've had with you. That's how it's gone, is what are we trying to accomplish? What are you trying to accomplish, Bryan? What do you want? Whatever it is we're talking about, it is that. So you got that from possibly those interactions with your dad. When did you recognize that as something to be in or focus on in your life as opposed to just like my dad does?
So very specific. So it's been all of the things are things that you do over and over again, but there's a very specific example. This was after my first year of entrepreneur. No, actually that's not true. It was my first year of being a real entrepreneur. All right. So we'll go a little bit deeper into
entrepreneur and a real entrepreneur. Now we're going to have to find out what that is.
All right. So we'll go a little bit deeper into the story that I laid out at the very beginning, which was super generic. But so I got laid off from Keep Infusionsoft at the time. And at that time, I had been involved in every feat. Like I knew Keep Infusionsoft better than anybody else. I'm like, I'll go do consulting. And I came to that conclusion because I went and I looked at job postings, and I had 5 kids. My youngest was 6 weeks old when I got laid off. And so I went and I looked at job postings, and I was like, well, these don't work. Like none of them that I could see myself stepping into. And this goes back to one of the things that I've had to work on a bunch is I second guessed myself forever. And this was for a long time. Way longer than anybody on the outside would think that I did. So I got laid off from Keep, and I'm like, well, I can't see myself being qualified or getting hired for a job that would make enough money to replace the income that I had and provide for my family. So that's not going to work. But I know Keep really well, so I guess I'll go do consulting with people that need to use this tool. And so I did some consulting, and I realized really quickly that at that point in my life, I was not interested in being a solo person that would hop on a phone call with people, quote a project, and then hopefully they took it, and then I would go do the project, and then I would just do that forever. It's like, well, no. Like that was just like, that's not going to work. So I did work with people for a while, but eventually I was like, I can't keep doing this. So I stopped, and then like I had a severance and I had some savings, and what happens when you stop working is that goes away. Then I tried a membership and actually sold. We spoke on stage the next year at their Keeps user conference. And I sold, I don't know, there were probably 300 people in the room. And I think I sold like 150 people or something into this membership or something like that. I don't know. Like it was.
Which is awesome.
Like
50% of the crowd is
like, and it might have even been 30%. I don't remember the exact numbers. I can go look at it. But it was a significant conversion rate into this membership. I never sold anything from stage. And it was like $50 a month. And it was going to be like, look, I'm going to go interview the top users, people that are using Keep or Infusionsoft at the time. And I'll just tell you what they're doing. And then I'll tell you how to do it super fast. And everyone's like, yeah, sign me up.
Yeah.
So in my mind, this is when I was not quite a real entrepreneur yet. And I don't know, I could probably make a case that I'm still not. But at that point, I was like, well, the math of the number of people that signed up times the monthly amount wasn't enough to cover all of my bills. So I was like, well, this isn't it. Right?
Wow,
Okay, that's right. Like
that's incredible.
Which I think goes to the doubting. Like I didn't recognize the concept of like, no, you build it, stupid. Do you know who shows up in one place and sells
stage?
And he gets up and sells one thing, and that's all they ever have to do forever. So anyway, so I delivered that stuff. It became a lot of stuff that I used for the rest of my business and everything, and it was really great. But I don't know if I ever added another person into that membership through any other like marketing channels. Like I just didn't, I didn't get it. And I think part of it is that like at my heart and at my core, like I'm a product guy. That's my default. That's what I would go to. Like I love to create things that are amazing. And so the selling of
and that's how you define product? Create things that are amazing?
That'll work for me. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, if I were like putting together a paper, I might put more thought into it, but
that's fine.
That works for me.
That's good.
Amazing would definitely be in there. So I stopped. I didn't ever market it again. In hindsight, every time I tell the story, I like look at the person just to see how they respond. They respond just like, you did what? You just stopped? What are you talking about? So so we just stopped. And then eventually those clients dropped off, and then I ran out of money. And about the same time, I connected with my now business partner. His name's Dave Lee. And he also worked at Keep back in the day. We connected. We decided we're going to start this new thing. And so we do a sponsorship. We're going to another one of the Keeps user conferences. And we roll in the short, there's a story there, but we roll in. My bank accounts are all overdrawn the day I'm going to go sell. I have no money, business or personal bank accounts. We sold a bunch of stuff. So first year was great. Sold a bunch of stuff, put us on the map. We did 7 figures in our first year.
It's incredible.
It is. You know Dan Rouse?
I do.
Okay. He has a really interesting response when somebody tells him that I've never heard anyone say, and I'm like, that's so good. You know what it is? He says, "Are you okay?"
To go from 0 to
yeah, because what I tell people all the time is like, yeah, it is great, and it sucked. Like, it was insane that whole first year. So we get to the end of the first year. This is what I was trying to get to, because your question, to get back on point, your question was like, when did that really click? Is like, oh, this is the way to do it as an entrepreneur. And so we get 7 figures in our first year, and we're tired, but it's annual planning. Got to do annual planning. So it's the end of the year. We're getting excited. This was for 2013. We're planning everything out. Go to my business partner's house, Dave's house. We're planning it all out. We spend 2 days, and the basic summary is we're going to double. And we go through, we're talking 2 full days. It's the 2 of us, right? So it's not like you're trying to cater to a bunch of people in a room. There's 2 people, yeah. 2 full days. We get all this planning stuff out. In the last 15 minutes, as we're walking out, this thought just popped into my head. And we're sitting in his office in his house before we walked out, and I was like, "Hey, I have a question for you. What if we didn't? Like, what if we didn't try to double?" And we stopped for a second because the money was great. We were making more money than we made before, but the schedule sucked. I had 5 kids. He had 3 kids. I was like, no, this is no good. This is not going to work.
Yeah.
And so in 15 minutes, we changed and said, no, our goal is to make 1 penny more, but to cut our schedule in half.
Okay.
And that experience has been like an anchor of like, you should always stop and be really clear about what you're trying to have happen and make sure. And there have been repeats of this. One of my favorite quotes, T.S. Eliot, he says, "We shall not cease from exploration, and all of our exploring will lead us to we shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all of our exploring will lead to arrive where we started and understand it for the first time." So I've been around this cycle a couple of times, but that was the first one that was like, dude, if you would have got clear on what you actually wanted and considered, did you want more money or did you want more time, then you would not have spent 2 days planning about how you're going to make more money.
Yeah.
So that was when it really hit, is you have to always, and it's a constant question, and you have to remind yourself, because yourself will forget. Like, yourself is not very reliable.
Yeah.
So that was like the first real live experience where it's like, oh yeah, we need to be really clear about what we're trying to do, and then have a conversation about how we're going to go do it, and then just ignore all the other things that we could do, and make sure that we're not accidentally adopting somebody else's dream. Why would we double? Because everybody's like, oh, double your business. Oh, I doubled my business. Great. I don't care. I have a life that I'm living, and that's designed the way that I want it to live, and I'll do whatever I have to do in my business to make my life work, not the other way around. So that was like the first one. And then there are others where I apparently had lapses of judgment and forgot that lesson, but then I relearned it. So I feel like it's getting pretty hammered in there now.
So I think that's one of my favorite things about intention is that I think we walk through life, and when I say we, I should be very careful. Many people walk through life just on autopilot, just like doing what they're doing.
Yep.
And it does take the asking yourself that question over and over to remind yourself to be intentional, to whatever it is, whatever the goal, whatever the thing you want to accomplish is, it has to meet your ends.
Yep.
And I remember a conversation you and I had years ago that it was like that. It was, oh, I want to make this much money. And you're like, okay, well, how much are you making now versus how much you're going to make then? What are you going to do with the difference?
The question is, what can you do with that bigger amount of money that you can't do with less?
I'm sure it's identical to what you said.
I'm telling you, that's exactly what I would have said. Is it's like, all right, what's the number? Let's say it's $1 million. Cool. What can you do with $1 million that you can't do with 500,000?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying don't go after $1 million.
Yeah.
I'm saying answer the question.
Exactly. And that was a cool thing to me, is that you weren't saying don't go after the big goal. It's just know why you're going after the big goal. Whatever it is, it has to mean something to you.
And it has to mean more than the time and energy that you're going to spend in the work to get it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, that would be called not profitable.
Yeah.
So.
Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying this episode, please subscribe, follow, and download our episode. Your support allows us to bring more intentional guests just like this, and it means the world to us. Now, let's get back to the episode. One of the things you brought up is that the communication, people kind of trail off and go down a significant separate path from what they told you. Why do people do that? You, being you, see this, and I know that, I assume that there are multiple things going on while you're talking to somebody at the same time.
Yeah.
Because the words that come out of your mouth are so incredibly intentional, or at least incredibly succinct that I know that there's thought put in that. So why is it that people go down other paths than?
So a couple different things. I think, right? I don't know. This is mindset according to Brad.
Bradism.
So one thing is the way that your brain thinks can be trained just like a muscle. We talk about muscle memory. There's brain memory or brain muscle memory, and you can train it how to think. And most people have never been taught / have never actually become aware of the fact that the way that their brain thinks by default. I think I picked this concept up from Jim Rohn in one of his videos, that the way that their brain thinks by default might be natural, but it's not successful.
Huh.
And when he said a phrase like, yeah, it's natural. And I think he was talking about doubts or whatever. He's like, it's natural, but it's not successful. And I was like, oh, that's freaking beautiful. So I think the first piece is that people aren't even aware that they have control over what their brain thinks about. And by the way, once you hear that, because I heard that too, people talk about it in different ways, but then I didn't realize you could actually do it until I actually tried to. You can tell your brain what to think about. You can tell it to stop thinking about other stuff. You can tell it how to think. You can catch yourself going off the same way, like you got kids, same way you're walking along and like your kid starts to walk off towards the street and you're on the sidewalk. It's like you grab your kid and pull him back. You can do that to your brain. So I think one thing is just a lack of awareness that you can actually do that. And then a lack of understanding how to do it, which is usually the result of people saying, well, I don't know how to do that, and they don't ever try. That's like saying, well, I can't bench press 225 pounds, so I'm not going to try. Yeah, because you haven't bench pressed the bar. We should start with the bar. That would be effort, and then you could work your way up to that, right? So I think that's one piece. I think the other piece, and that one's like the softer one. That's like you don't have to take any. We don't have to swallow any ego. The other one where we have to swallow ego is I think that a lot of people, and normally I would say most people, but the reality is I just think it's a lot of people, or what I should say is I think it's caused by the fact that people would much rather talk about stuff than actually figure out what the gap is and then go do the work. So let me try and say that another way to make it more clear. I think by default, most humans, maybe all humans by default, are really afraid of telling the truth, of just shining a light on the situation in whatever aspect of their life it is and actually just facing it. Because in my opinion, this is the way I look at the world, all there is in the world, there's what I want, and there's where I am right now, and there's work in the middle, and that's it. And that's literally in every single aspect of my life. There's the marriage I want with my wife, there's the one I have right now, and there's the work that needs to be done in the middle, which is a combination of who I am gets put in the middle with the work. There's the type of kids that I have right now, that I want, the type of kids that I have right now, and then there's the work in the middle. There's the business that I have right now, there's the one that I want, and then there's work in the middle. That's it. So there's the basketball team that I coach and how good they are. There's the one that how good I want them to be, the one that I have, and then there's work in the middle. So like everything for me in life is literally, what do I have? What do I want? What is the work in the middle, which might be who I become. It might be the work that needs to be done. And I've gotten really comfortable looking at it and being like, well, that's stupid. Like I'll just tell myself, you're being stupid. And I'm not afraid of it. It's not like a negative thing for me anymore. That's why at the beginning, I'm kind of joking when I say stupid. I don't mean it as an insult. I just mean like stupid, meaning what you're doing doesn't align to what you want.
It's not going to bring the outcome.
Yeah. And there was like a lens clicked for me in this when, and a lot of people talk about this in terms of, you get like life coaches that talk about it, or you get like, people make it really fancy where it's like, we look at the world when we're younger. In fact, I'll just tell this through the lens of a story. So when I was, I don't know, it's probably, I have no idea, somewhere between 8 and 13. So growing up, we didn't do cereal in our house. That was like a no-go. It was like granola or whatever. We just didn't do cereal.
Do you do it now, by the way?
I don't like cereal.
Well, but
my kids, I don't care. My kids can have it. Doesn't make a difference to me. So we didn't do cereal at all. And I remember one time my parents went out. I had fallen asleep or whatever, but they went out. My mom was into coupons at the time and went out with like my siblings and some of their friends and came back. And there was like, they had this coupon thing where they got, we're talking like, I don't know, it's got to be 50 or 70 boxes of cereal that they got for like free because someone had a buy one, get one free. They'll match it over here, whatever it was, some combination of multiplying coupons, ridiculous number. And they're all hanging out in the kitchen. And I remember coming in and I see all this cereal and they were laughing and joking about something. And I came in and I said, it was one of those like where I thought I understood what they were talking about. And I said something that I thought would fit in. And then in the same way that any other 7 or 8 year old comes in and says something and it's kind of funny to the adults because you totally miss the context, they laughed. And I remember getting embarrassed by it.
Okay.
And for a long time in my life, and it actually ended up turning into something I'm really good at, for a long time in my life, what I did as a defense mechanism is I will shy away from having an opinion about something until I know everything. So I'll go really deep to understand all of the different aspects of something before I actually before I jump in, or I'll be hesitant to have a really strong opinion. It's like, well, I don't know if I have the entire picture. So let me feed into what we had talked about before. So, and we were talking about what are the things that lead to it. So number one, I think, is people don't remember, don't understand that they actually have control over how their brain thinks. And then number two, they'd rather not actually just face the reality. So I lived my entire life thinking that I had to learn everything about everything or about anything before I could contribute any value to it. Because of this experience I had when I was 6 or I was 7. Nowadays, people like to call it trauma, which I think actually is a little bit disrespectful to people that actually have trauma, but that's a whole separate conversation. But it's like, I'm as an adult, as a 30-year-old, I'm operating through the lens of a 6 or 7-year-old who had some adults chuckle because I didn't understand the entire context of a conversation and I was like half awake. That's stupid. And not stupid insulting. That's just like, I should laugh at that. And I should feel ridiculously free now that I realize where I've been limited.
Yeah.
But what a lot of people do is they're very afraid of shining a light on that. And as soon as that clicked for me, where I was like, well, I don't have any reason to be ashamed of that. Like, I'd rather just find all of those and get rid of them and replace them with something that's successful rather than something that's natural. And then it flipped everything for me. So like, I feel like I'm a SWAT team on a mission to find all the things that are wrong with the way that my brain processes the world. And I'll just laugh at them. It's like, well, that was dumb. And there's lots of money that I could have made that I didn't make. There's lots of things lots of relationships that could have ended differently or could have been handled differently. Lots of probably pain if I'm thinking about my wife, pain and frustration, definitely, because you can't be in a relationship like that without having some of that. Like, all that could have been different, but I was dealing with whatever version of the lens that I had at that time. And so I'm just on a mission to find those and get rid of them. But a lot of people are afraid to do that. Like, it's a scary thing to just acknowledge. So I've tried to train my brain to no, it doesn't matter. Like, you can't change anything in the past anyway. So you might as well just figure out, well, what caused it, and let's change it moving forward. And pretty much all that ends up happening up in your head. So,
are you open to seeing a little differently what I've heard you just say, especially the story of you needing to find the context as a kid? And
I'm open to anything, yeah.
So here's the interesting thing to me is that while I don't see the totality of what you've explained, I got a 3-minute version of what actually has happened over the 30-year period that you said. Okay. So I don't claim to see it clearly like you do. And getting to the bottom of what it is, part of what I like about you, though, is because you help me get to the bottom of what it really is and uncover, what is it really? Even though there might be, situations where I'm going too far into the research or looking too deep into this problem where it's like, I know enough, let's move. And that might be one thing, but I'm saying generally the best leaders in the world are going to listen to everybody and then weigh in last, or weigh in when they understand what they can understand. Mm-hmm. So I think your situation or how that affected your life, and possibly in a negative or a non-useful way.
Well, so here,
it's useful because I think that more people that could get to the bottom of situations, maybe not as quickly as you do, but getting to the bottom of it, as opposed to playing in that, I want to talk about this problem but not do anything about it, is a superpower. Maybe that's how you've honed it.
Yeah. So there's a couple of different pieces into it. One, the reason why. So this would be another piece that would explain why you have the experience that you get more out of having conversation with me. Is I have a lot more experience in my life than most people diving to the bottom and analyzing stuff. So I have a lot of material because I consider. Have you ever seen Over the Hedge?
Yeah.
Okay. You know the chipmunk that they won't let have the caffeine?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Okay, so if you haven't seen Over the Hedge, it's about some animals where people move in and build a town. They're trying to take over their forest. There's a chipmunk, and he's crazy energetic. They won't let him have any caffeine because he'll be out of control. And then there's a scene at the very end where they go to turn on the laser system that's going to protect the houses from these people, and they need somebody that can beat the laser going from here to the other side of literally the laser. So they have him pound a Mountain Dew or something, and he's cruising around the world. Everybody else is in slow mo, and he's cruising around, right? Uh-huh. So when I think about things, that's what my brain's like, all right, so we're here. Let me go down. I'm trying to go down as many different paths to consider all the different options. And I do that, I think, I don't know, and I don't actually really care, but I think I do it because I had this experience, and maybe others like it, where when I was young, it was I didn't understand it. So that has turned into a superpower for me. So I feel like I'm very observant because of that. I'm paying attention to all the things that are around me, and probably deep down because I'm trying to avoid being in that situation. I'm not really worried about it anymore.
Yeah.
But my brain is wired to process. So the reason why I told that story is only to demonstrate, for me, the question was, why don't most people do it? Why do they get distracted, or why? And it really would be like, why are they doing things in their lives that don't align to what they want? And I think a part of it is because most people are afraid of just being like, oh, that's like whatever their equivalent of that is in their life.
Yeah.
They're afraid of looking at it. And just being like, well, if I can find that and change it, then everything gets easier. Yeah. For whatever reason, people are really afraid to change stuff. Like there's something to be shame in it or whatever. I've just tried to rewire my brain to say, no, it's really simple. There's the me that starts my life. There's the me that ends my life. And they're not the same. And the only thing that's going to be different in the middle is change. So what's the change that I need so I can be the best version of myself? And I'm looking for it. So that's one thing that would lead to like, why might people get distracted, right?
Yeah.
On the other side, though, when we talk about gathering information and then making a decision, 100% agree with that. 100%. That's the way really anybody, like you should be looking at what's the root cause of this and be asking those questions and whatever. So there's just something in there, and I've observed it in lots of people. And it's probably one of the biggest things people have to get used to when they come work with me, because my general philosophy is like, well, the easiest way to make progress is to just not let things be awkward. And the easiest way to have things not be awkward is I'm just going to call it out from the beginning.
Talk about it.
Yeah, just shine a light on it. You want to know how to make an elephant not be in the room? Call him out.
Call him out.
Really easy.
Well, I think one of the most important things I've heard you say in context of the last few minutes here is that you've been able to look at what you do and call it dumb or stupid and be like, yeah, that's dumb. Don't do that. Let's figure out a way that gets to an outcome. And I think that a lot of people like tie self-loathing and depressive feelings and shame.
For me, it's like, I just
dumb.
got okay with that being funny.
Yeah.
So here's the irony, maybe. Go back to the story of when the adults kind of laughed at me. And think of the time where a kid came in and did something, you're like, oh, that's cute.
Yeah.
Is that an insult?
No, I love that kid all the more.
No, right? And like for the kid, like once they realize it, like when you realize you do something, you're like, oh, that's dumb. I just did that thing. But somehow when we recognize it's something we've been doing for a decade,
yeah,
all of a sudden it's this like thing to be worried about. I'm like, it's just not.
Yeah.
Or try this on if you're watching and you're like, I don't believe it. What if it's not? Just try it on for size. Just try it. Just pretend like it didn't actually matter and tell me which one works better. I don't care if it feels normal. I just care if it works better.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think if there are any other bullet points on that thing. So
I love it. I absolutely love it. And I think that there's so much to unpack in what you've just said. How can you start to recognize those automatic reactions? You know, you were able to identify this one and hone it into a superpower, as you said, now. But initially, it could have taken you on a path that I see a lot of people, and I could point to myself in this.
It did take me on a path that you're about to describe.
That is, I'm not good. I'm like, this is part of the bad part of me, or the wrong, like I make mistakes, or no one likes me, or whatever it is, that pulls us away from what actually is a gift of ours.
So
how do you become aware is my question of those things.
Okay. Think I'm going to answer that question. Okay. So my hat says D.A.L.R, D.A.L.R.
Yeah.
That's a personal thing that I made. It's how I define the process of progress.
I wondered about that. You wore that years ago. I never asked you. I wasn't in a place where I could ask you, but I saw it in videos. I saw it in places. I was like, I should have just texted you. But like, I wondered what it was, and then I learned what it was. But
so it's, for me, the process of progress in any aspect of your life, for any person, anything, whatever. And that's what I try to find is like, what I'm looking for is what's actually true, irrefutably. Nobody can debate it. It's just true. And they're like, well, I'm going to do that. And then I'll explore other things that might be true, but I'll do those a little bit more cautiously. Like I'll be more aware. But once I find something that's like, no, that's just the way that it is, and nobody is immune to that, then that just becomes part of the way that I live life. And so I wear hats all the time, right? But I'm like, I might as well get one that means something to me. So D.A.L.R, it stands for, I'm not going to go into all the details, but decide, act, learn, repeat. We're going to talk about learn because you're talking about how to become more aware.
Yeah.
So learn, each one of those has like little tagline or whatever. And learn is when you learn with Scoreboard Humility. And Scoreboard Humility means pay attention to what the score is. So I come from sports, play basketball, and like one of my favorite things is when you have somebody who's like, I made a really cool play, but you're losing by 30, right? Like it's like scoreboard is what the crowd would chant or whatever when they're trying to talk trash and they're down by 30 or whatever. Yeah. And I think we could all benefit from some friends around us or just some voices around us that when we start to get all full of ourselves because we did one thing really good, it's like, yo, scoreboard. Like Scoreboard in your relationship with a significant other, scoreboard in your relationship with your kids, scoreboard in your personal financial relationship, scoreboard in your business finances, scoreboard in your business purpose, scoreboard in your internal peace and contentment, scoreboard in your relationship. I can go on and on. Yeah. Scoreboard. So the way you become aware is you actually start to pay attention to the score. Because I don't know, is it your intention in your marriage to not be happy? No. It's not mine. No. So guess what? If something's off, you should check the scoreboard. And if something's off, you don't have to check the scoreboard. That is the scoreboard. But if the scoreboard is off, if something's off, guess what it means? You're doing something wrong. Period.
That doesn't align with what you want.
Yes, because the scoreboard is inherently tied to the game that you're playing.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're doing something wrong. Period. Not comma. Period. You are doing something wrong. Then the question is, well, what is it? I don't believe that this life was built for us to be afraid. I just don't believe it.
I agree.
And as I look around at the irrefutable truth, I don't believe that there's any intent or purpose of why we're here, whether you want to explain it through evolution or you want to explain it through God. I don't care how you want to explain it. I don't see any element in this life that's like, yeah, you know what's successful and good is to be afraid. So if you're afraid, you're doing something wrong. And then now, how do I fix that? That's a great question. Now we're actually getting somewhere. So how do we fix it? And then we'd go look at that. So for me, the way to become aware is to start actually looking at the scoreboard all the time.
What if you look at the scoreboard and you're always down by 40? What if you look at the scoreboard and you're always down by 40?
Well, you just should probably start trying to be down by 38.
Okay. No, I got you. I like that.
Yeah, then you're doing it wrong. And if you're always down by 40, because we don't only have one scoreboard, we have lots of scoreboards with different aspects. But if you're always down by 40, what I would tell you is you probably are playing too many games. That would be my first gut thing without knowing any other information. What are you going to cut so you can actually play a game that you can put enough energy into to not be down by 40? Ask me how I know.
How do you know, Brad?
Anything I say that is how I know, it's because I've done it wrong way too many times.
Okay.
Then you should just cut stuff. It's like, but I can't. Then be down by 40. Let me know how that goes.
Where's a part in your life where you've cut to be able to focus on the scoreboard? Now, I'm not saying you had to cut it eternally out of your life, but you had to cut for a portion of time.
Okay, let's see. So I feel like I have to, the simple one is this is like a weekly thing because I'm an entrepreneur. My brain goes a million miles an hour in a million different directions. And I have 6 different software products that I want to build today, right now. And I can see 4 or 5 different services that we can go create. And I'll find myself slipping into we'll start to work on them. So like probably the last 6 months, I have intentionally had to undo a project that we had started because I recognize that's not actually a project that is for right now. And if I try to add that, it means that I won't have enough time to actually be organized at work, which means it's going to spill over to not being at work, which means the basketball team that I'm coaching is going to be impacted and affected. My family's going to be impacted and affected. So it's like, nope, we got to cut that. We got to bring it back. We today in our quarterly planning at 6th Division, we had a conversation about a program that we launched recently and realized that this is not the right positioning for it. We need to clean some things up. And so it's sort of like temporarily on pause, maybe for the next month or so while we clean some things up. It's like, stop that because we're trying to do too much and we don't have enough bandwidth to actually get to the things that we want because we were like, oh, we're going to hire 2 new people and that's not going to take a bunch of our time and energy. So it's like, all right, we messed that one up. My son Landon, great basketball player. Normally a great basketball player. You have them on club teams, like to have practices multiple times a week, and then they like to play 17 games on the weekend, which is stupid. Whole separate podcast interview. So this last year, knowing that I was going to be coaching high school, and last year I coached the JV team, and then I assisted the varsity team. This year I did not coach the JV team because I wanted to be more available to help Landon train, and we had Landon not play on a club team officially, so he had more time available to train. And he was playing with the kids at the high school level. So it's all over the place. Oh, no, we're not going to do that. I had started out, I was like, I'm going to work out. I put a gym in my garage and I'm going to lift weights 5 days a week. Or I think I was going to lift 6 days a week and it was going to be an upper body split every other day. And I was like, yeah, no, it's not going to happen. So I got 2 days upper body, 2 days lower body. Like constantly it's like, okay, no, just take that out. Take that out. I don't need that. And at the point where you take something out and then it starts to affect the score in a negative way, I need to put that back in.
Okay. So you're making minor adjustments along the scoreboard, looking at the scoreboard, cutting things out so you have more focused energy on the scoreboard, and you're trying to make those minor adjustments as quickly as possible. My question is, do you ever make like a schizophrenic change before you even know?
Yeah. Do you have to, almost all of those are cleanups.
Okay.
Almost all of them are cleanups. Okay. And it's like, oh, no, Like I wanted to coach JV because I wanted to be a head coach and get a feel for it. And so, yeah, I'll coach JV. And it was like, that'll be really great and exciting. And it was a great year. And we had a ton of fun, had a really good year. And then afterwards, it's like, all right, if I really step back, like if I'd stepped back last year and I really considered where was I going to spend all my time and my energy, I don't know if I'd have done it.
Okay.
So yeah, and yes, all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. And I think maybe some people too will fall into the trap of thinking like, oh, I make the decision, it's always perfect. And then like, you can get ahead of it and never go down a wrong turn. No, that's not the case. Not in my experience. I'm just not that smart.
Well, that goes into your dollar on like you're making decisions quickly, changing wherever you commitment. You can't get out of being a coach for JV like midway through the season. Like that's a commitment. But once it's over, like connecting with what matters and then moving along that line.
Yeah, and probably the most nuanced part of that, because there'll be some people that'll be like, well, wait a minute. The most nuanced part of that is knowing when it's time for you to adjust because the scoreboard's not working and it is what aligns to what you actually want. And then knowing when you're just freaking being a sissy.
So, well, there's a lot of, that's easier said than done.
That's why I say the nuance, and I'll acknowledge
So
it 100%. There's a nuance. I don't think there's an algorithm for that, because I was having a conversation with some of my kids recently. Like, look, part of this is you just got to do work. It doesn't always have to be dumb work. And I don't know that there's a checklist that you can just produce that defines it. So that's a question that goes into everything that I'm deciding to do is, okay, am I just being a little bit weak or lazy in this, or is this really like, no, this should be a pivot for me?
What's your litmus on the weakness? Is it just situational, or is there like I go to this thought process when I want to see if I'm being a pansy about this, or I'm actually, no, this is too much and I need to pivot?
It's a great question. And maybe there is sort of a checklist. And I picked this up from somebody, I don't know, one of those little cute quote things on Instagram or something. And I'd heard it before, and then I saw it again. I was reminded of it. One of the checklist items is, are you running uphill or downhill? And I don't quit on the incline. So that was like, don't quit on the incline. It's way too easy to quit on the incline. And even then,
Isn't
like that's not
an incline.
No, you can cut things that are working well.
Oh,
it was
okay,
really
okay.
fun. It was really fun coaching JV.
Yeah.
It was really fun. And I did make a commitment, and there's a lot in the middle. And I didn't really consider not doing it in the middle of the season, but that was a lot. When we had game day and like I'm leaving at 3:00 to go to an away game, coaching a game that starts at 4:30, and then I'm sitting for the varsity game and I get home, it's like 6 hours. Like my brain's fried. But the point is, you don't stop in the middle of when it's hard. Like you can check at the top and then see if you want to get rid of it. So that's not a universal thing, because sometimes it's like you could just make a really bad decision about what you could set a really crappy goal. I've set those, and it's like, well, that's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So for me, one of the things that I check is like, okay, is this just hard? Have I actually gotten to a point where I'm in like a rhythm? So here's another maybe better example that kind of captures both of those of like, am I just being weak, and or when have I maybe not accomplished my goal, but I still might quit even though it's not on the incline? So recently started doing some content stuff. So I started a YouTube channel and started producing some videos. And I have go back to the product, make something amazing. Like for me, everything has to be amazing, which tends to sometimes work against me because I analyze all the details. So we're creating it, and I made a commitment to a mastermind group that I'm supposed to go meet with next week. We'll see, because we're in the middle of a high school basketball playoffs. But I said, if I don't have, I don't know, it was like 18 or 19 long form contents posted to YouTube, and then 3 short form pieces across like social media platforms across a couple of, it was like 168 pieces of short form content. If I don't have that done, because I've been talking about this for a while, by the time I come back, I'm buying meals for everybody. So I started to get into it, started to create some videos, and again, I'm overthinking it. And then I finally got in a groove with the long form videos, and I haven't even gotten to like short form stuff, because I don't really trust just handing it off to an AI tool. I haven't quite got to that point, and I haven't had the time because we had other stuff going on. But I got in the middle of it, and I was like annoyed at like how some of the videos were coming out. I'm sure you went through some of this when you started at the beginning. And it was like, this is dumb. I don't think this is actually the strategy. But it was because I was on the uphill of actually creating the content.
Yeah.
Then I got in the groove, and I was like, okay, now I can see it. Now I can see like the filter. And once I got through that, I was like, okay. And what it took was, I don't know, probably 4 to 5 hour chunks of me trying to record something and get something out that I would be happy with. And it didn't work, and I didn't like it. And it was actually probably pretty good content still, but like I didn't like it until I finally got to, oh, here's how I could do it. And I considered just stopping probably 3 times. Just forget it. I don't actually care, because we can make my businesses work without it. It's not that big of a deal. And then I do all the justification, like it's probably just an ego play, and it's not really, all that crap, right?
Yeah.
So I did all that, and then as soon as I find it really interesting. As soon as inside I was like, No, I'm just going to freaking figure it out. And I'm just going to do what I said I was going to do as far as like the 19 pieces. It all kind of started to click.
Yeah.
And then once it started to click, the ideas started to come like, oh, and here's how I can make it better and make it even easier. And I've got a couple of those that I haven't even executed on yet, but I can see it now. This will be easy on the long form side. Now, I'm supposed to go meet with these guys next week. I've done no short form content. So I will be buying meals. Either at this one.
I'll have some short form for you by then.
Or not enough where we're supposed to be. But that was one where I was like, okay, I'm like, this is not working. And I'm thinking I might just stop. But for me, it was a reminder that most of the things that I start to do for the first time, we talked about it with the whole setup.
Yeah.
They're hard. And they're harder longer than I think they're going to be. And that's where most people quit. So the uphill climb is not necessarily that you've accomplished the success, but it's like, oh, I see how I could do this. Imagine if you stopped doing this podcast before you figured out all the nuances, even down to the little headphone thing or whatever. Right? It's like it would never have been anything. And now it's like, okay, I can do it. And you might choose to quit now because it doesn't align to what it is that you're trying to create, but it's not because you were just in the middle of having to learn it and then you gave up. So that's like the loose litmus test. And again, it's a little bit nuanced. And by nuanced, I just mean you kind of got to figure it out for yourself. But those are the things I want to consider is, am I quitting because this is hard and I haven't just got through the initial hard? Or am I quitting because it's like, no, I am very clear that I can go do this, that I know how to do this, and that I'm capable of doing this. But I'm quitting because this does not align to what I'm trying to create. And if I keep it, it'll actually impact what I'm trying to create.
Okay. Like it's the grand vision and having some sense of that. There's so many routes we could go down this, but I do want to share something that I think has become clear in listening to you today. I love to hike. And when I hike downhill and I'm trying to keep a pace, it's typically not safe. Like if especially steep stuff, you got to be smart. So there's a way to do that. And anybody that's hiked long enough knows there's a way to zigzag so you're cutting back and not messing up your ankles and sliding on the rocks or whatever.
Yep.
But here's what I'm equating to you is like, as I step downhill, I have learned that if I'm super light on my feet, like every step is maybe just 6 inches, like 8 inches. It's not like taking these massive strides. Then every one of those decisions is like really easy to correct. And I've almost rolled an ankle, I don't know, thousands of times, literally thousands of times, because it's so quick that it's like, oh, no big deal. Like I just quickly overcome it. And I think that's what I'm seeing in a little bit of the macro level of looking at what you do in your life is that you're taking steps that, at least this is how I'm extrapolating it, taking steps that are purposeful, that make a difference, but they're light enough to where it's like, nope, that's not it. Let's shift. As opposed to, I commit, dude, I jumped 8 feet off of this and I got to land it. And if I don't land it, I'm going to break some bones.
Yeah. And I mean, there'll probably be some times in life where you have an equivalent to that.
Sure.
Like, it's called life.
Yeah,
It reminds me of a quote I came across in high school, and I loved it. And I didn't really understand what it meant, but I loved it. It was by Dwight D. Eisenhower. He said, plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. So that's what comes to mind for me when you talk about going down a hill. The plan is I'm going from here and I'm trying to get to the bottom.
Yeah.
Overall, that's the objective. If you set a plan of how you're going to go down, that's like heavy steps like I'm going. No, I'm moving. Like I'm light on my feet. That's planning. That's like I'm paying attention. So maybe planning's not the best word for it, but like how you get somewhere doesn't matter nearly as much as like I know what I'm trying to create and I'm willing to adjust and I'm willing to adapt and I'm not going to give up because it's hard, but I'm also not going to be stupid and keep doing it because it's hard.
Yeah.
Double-edged sword, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. There's so many things that I've learned from you over the years, and one of the things I think that I'll wrap this up with that may not be quickly wrapped up, but it's like it's the stages of progress, because what we've talked about today is like how to overcome some challenges, how to identify, to be aware enough that you can make changes, light on your feet so you can do that quickly and then see if it aligns with what you're doing and then move. But it's those stages of progress. I found that recently. You explained that to me recently, and I just was in love. It's one of the Bradisms I've written down and I've memorized. So I'm interested to know if there's anything you want to share in that regard.
Okay, so this came from the seed of this was planted by Garrett White, runs Wake Up Warrior, I think still or whatever.
Yeah. I recognize him.
Garrett J. White. So he was a client of ours, and he has a talk where he talked about this thing, and I heard him say some version of this at some point. So it got planted in the back of my head. This is years ago, and then it was probably 6 or 7 or 8 years later, and there was a stretch where me and my 3 boys are the youngest, and they're all about the same age, and we started the thing, and it was probably for about 6 months. We ran a mile every single day, and at first we ran them together, and then it was like, report your times, we can't run them together, but it was every day, everybody ran a mile. And there was one time that I was running with my oldest son. He's 18 now. He's, I don't know, maybe 14 or something at the time. And we're running, and he had either been sick or whatever. Like running was not really, it was not really his thing. And at the time, probably, he was also probably a little weak-minded in regards to this. And I think he would agree with this. So there was a little bit of, it's hard, so I'm going to quit. So we take off running, and basically, so I live at the end of a cul-de-sac in our neighborhood. My parents live, if you come into the neighborhood and go left, we're at the end of the cul-de-sac. If you go right, my parents are at the end of the cul-de-sac, and it's a half mile from the end of the cul-de-sac to the end of the cul-de-sac. So we just run down to the cul-de-sac and come back around. So we take off running, and everything's going great. We're cruising along. And he hits about the half-mile mark. You can tell him starting to slow up, like I'm about to be done. And I'm like, just keep running. Just don't stop. We get to the 3/4 mark. So he's now crossed sort of the entrance to our neighborhood. And you can see our house at the end of the cul-de-sac. He's got about a 1/4 mile to go still. And he's starting to cry. This is painful for him. Kid keeps going and at the end, I always tell him you sprint at the end. You always sprint at the end. So he sprints at the end. I mean, he's been like running, but this is like a traumatic experience. I probably scarred him, and he can get some counseling later for it. But so he makes it back, and he's on the grass in our yard, laying on the ground, and he's crying. And I'm like, dude, what's up? What's wrong? What's going on? And I don't remember exactly what he said, but basically what he was communicating is like, it's hard. I'm not very good at it. And then whatever other, so remember when I said period, not comma? Mm-hmm. It's hard. And then he put a comma, not a period. And the comma was, and then all the things that it means about me, about why I'm not whatever. And I was like, okay, I think you just, and then this was like inspiration. So I was like, oh, it's obvious to me that you don't understand the phases of progress. And I don't remember if that's what I said exactly, but I was like, all right, look, let me explain something to you. Let me explain how progress works, okay? Phase 1 is you suck. Phase 2 is you work hard. And then phase 3 is, and then I paused. And he's like, you get better, or you get good, I think he said. And I was like, oh, that's the problem. No. Phase 3 is you just suck a little bit less. And then phase 4 is you continue to work harder, you continue to, and you're in phase 4 for a really long time. And if you stick through that long enough, at some point, you might actually be kind of good at something. Like those are the phases of progress. It's a thing in our family. All my kids know it. We've talked about it a ton. So it's you suck, you work hard, you suck a little bit less, and then you keep working hard. And at some point, you'll actually be pretty good at something. And those are the phases of progress. And for him, if I were to make a case for the mindset around that, if you could understand all the things that were going on inside of him when he was 14 and you compare it to where he is at 18, it's like a totally different person. Like really grasping that understanding of, and if I would have known that growing up too, it's like, I'm not very good. Yeah, duh. I don't know if you follow Eric Thomas.
Instead of it being an identifier that you are no good.
Yeah, I'm
like,
I'm no good, period. Not, I'm not good at this, comma, therefore I'll never do anything other, whatever, right? You ever listen to Eric Thomas, hip hop preacher?
Yeah.
So he's got a thing where he's one of his little the things that he talks about. He's like, I'm no good at math. Yeah, because you've never studied. I'm not good at writing because you've never written before. He's like, it's like you haven't actually done the work. It's a little bit actually audacious of you to think that you should be good. You haven't done anything. So anyway, those are the phases of progress. And if I were to like wrap everything up, this would be like, this is how I view the world at like a top level. Because everything for me is frameworks and then systems. Frameworks of how I organize, how I think about the world, and then systems so that when I go to do something, I can do it the same way every time and save time and not waste time. That's like the way it works. So for me, the very first big piece is, what am I actually trying to make happen with my life? And for me, I have that broken up into, there's like 5 or 6 categories. They're pretty simple. It's my personal development, my relationship with my wife, my relationship with my kids, my relationship with other people, and then money, and I might have another one in there. But then I got to provide for this life, right? So it's like 4 or 5 categories. So like I'm really clear, like my life's made up into buckets. And then I am constantly revisiting and paying attention to what is success, what does it actually look like? What do I actually want to have happen in each one of those categories? And that gives me scoreboards. And then as I look at the scoreboards, I'm just giving myself, like not officially, although I think this would be dope, I actually have a task in ClickUp in my thing to create a thing for this of like my life scoreboard. But every week it's like, cool, give yourself a grade, A, B, C, D, or F. And then whichever ones don't have good grades, those are the ones that you should do some course correcting on. And then the way you do course correcting is you dollar it. So what are the areas in the buckets of my life?
Yeah.
And then I've got a process to go figure out what I want to do. And then as I go through that process, the phases of progress are like, yeah, you suck. That's fine. Get better. And it's not going to happen right away. So keep going until you get good enough to get what you actually want. And then in that process, what I've learned is in the process of becoming who you need to become, because ultimately I said before, there's like the thing that I have and the thing that I want, and then there's work in the middle.
Yeah.
The real work is who you become. It's not actually the work that you do. The only reason why we don't have a thing that we want is because we haven't become the person who's deserving of it yet. So in the process of becoming the person who's deserving of having the thing that I want, what happens is you will raise your standard of excellence and you'll raise your standard of what is okay for you. and you'll set a new target. And then that new target will require that you become another version of yourself, which I believe is the exact purpose of why we're on this earth, is the continual evolution and enhancement and growth of ourselves so that we can continue to serve other people better. So that would be it. If I were to give like a framework of how I think about it, and it literally is this simple. Some people are like, no, there's got to be more stuff. No, it's not. It's just, what are the buckets of my life? What is success in each one of those? And then I'm going to review it. And then the more I can dollar in my life, the faster I'll get to the success that I want. And one of the biggest things that will take me off is if I don't remember the phases of progress. And that's about it. And then it's like, all right, let's go. Let's just try to figure out what's in the way. Who am I not that I need to be? And then what work do I need to do? And then I'm going to make a decision of what that is. I'm going to take action, and I'm going to realize, I'm going to learn, like, did that work or not? It did. Okay, well, let's keep going down that path. And if not, then let's go do something else. And then like it sounds really simple. It takes work, but I want to simplify what needs to be done, knowing that when I actually go to do it, it's going to be hard enough.
Oh, yeah. Like you said, it's always going to take more work than we think initially about anything we want to accomplish, but that's fine. What I love, and I hope that people are hearing, is that you have this pretty amazing perspective on the world. You've been able to codify it into these systems and ways to think about things, frameworks, as you said, and it doesn't have to be catastrophic. Every decision doesn't have to be catastrophic. It can be simple. It can be scoreboard humility, looking at what I need to accomplish, aligning it with what you're after, and simplifying the buckets of life. And you don't have to have some amazing sense of, I'm going to be this perfectly intentional person, and it's like, start where you are, be okay with where the scoreboard is, so long as you want to improve it, but understand that it is, as opposed to fighting it. No, I'm not down by 30. Yeah, dude, you're down by 30.
Yeah.
And then making the adjustments. So I think that's such a great style of, this is doable. Being intentional and accomplishing what you want and becoming the person you want to become, it actually is doable. It's not overwhelming. It doesn't have to be, so long as you follow what you've talked about.
And if it's overwhelming, you're trying to do too much.
Too many scoreboards.
You're just trying to do too much too fast, or you've set an improper expectation. If there's any ever negative energy that gets into life, it's because there's a misalignment between what is and what is your expectation, period. Mm-hmm. And
expectations are worthless, by the way.
Yeah. What if you just didn't have them? And it's like, I want to go do that. I guess I'll figure out, rather than here's what I think it's going to take. I guess I'll figure out what it's going to take on the path to trying to get it.
Yeah.
And you brought up, not to beat a dead horse or keep going, but you brought up earlier something that I think is an important principle in this definition of what are the scoreboards? What do you want the score to be? And you were like, it doesn't have to be catastrophic. It doesn't have to be magnificent. And you brought it up in terms of money when we talked about what does $1 million get you that $500,000 doesn't? Mm-hmm. What I've found is the hardest thing for people to do when they're deciding what they want the score to be, or the game that they're playing, or what success looks like, is they can't actually just decide for themselves. I'm really comfortable with the fact that I don't have to make a dime more than I make right now for the rest of my life. In fact, I could make less than what I make right now for the rest of my life, and I will have won. I will have gotten everything that I want. And it's not wouldn't be the guy out there talking about how I built this 8-figure whatever. That's the hardest thing for people to decide on, is they feel like they're copping out when they go to set their goals, or when they go to define what success looks like. It's got to be this amazing thing. I also used to think, like, in my relationship with my wife, when we did stuff, it always had to be this extravagant thing. And then it's like, no, it's not actually what it has to be. And so I think having a healthy dose of like practicality, and then really, I guess that's not even the way to say it. It's like really to be bold enough to just say, I don't need the thing that everybody else is saying that they need. I don't have to make $1 million. It doesn't mean I'm not going to try. So one of the ways I talk about this is I talk about floor of acceptability and ceiling of possibility. So when you're setting these things, what you want to think of is, what's the floor of acceptability? Meaning we're not going below that. So at a minimum, this is what has to be true in order for this to work. That number's way lower. And when you ask the question, what does $1 million give you that 500 doesn't? You'll get down to a way lower number of what you need. Same thing with time. So you have the floor of acceptability, and then you have the ceiling of possibility. There really is no ceiling of possibility. Yeah. We want to keep going. But when you go to establish this, and especially if you're feeling overwhelmed, it's like what you said, just stop trying to, in order for you to run a mile, you got to run 100 yards. So to some degree, for some people, it might be like, just set the goal to run 100 yards. That might be the next thing for you to set, rather than the run a mile. Right?
And you don't have to feel bad about yourself for doing the 100 yards because it wasn't a mile.
Yeah, do that every day.
Yeah.
Right. You got the stories of the people like, I'm going to get back in shape. And so the first thing I did was, for 3 weeks to build a habit. I don't know if you've heard, I don't know how famous this story is, but I came across, like, for the first 3 weeks to build a habit, guy went to the gym, literally walked in, touched the machine, and went home. but he built the habit of going to the gym.
That was in James Clear's book.
There you go.
Atomic Habits.
Yeah. That's funny.
I bring that up so often.
My 14-year-old, he just finished that one. He's like, Dad, I need another book to read. And I was like, all right, I got one for you.
I think that's the most quoted book in my life currently.
Yeah.
Like for the
But
Boston.
and people would read that, and maybe this is, we will never stop if we keep coming up, let the ideas keep coming up. But another really good question that I like to live by is like, well, what if that's true? Like, what if it's true that I could actually create the life that I want out of starting out of habits where I just get up and I go touch a machine at a gym, so that I build the habit of doing that, and then I can start working out, and I just let that gradually build. What if that's actually true? Because I think what a lot of us do is like, oh, that sounds really great, and I get that in theory, but that doesn't apply to me. Okay, I think you might have missed it. And I love this, so I'll finish with this, and then I'll stop. I did a presentation recently. We talked about this. What's faster, rabbit or a turtle? What's faster?
Depends.
No, what's faster?
No, it depends.
What do you mean it depends? Which one's faster?
I would say a rabbit.
Rabbit's faster, right? Except in the story, who won?
A turtle.
The turtle. This is really interesting.
That's why I said depend.
I know. But the fact is the rabbit's faster. But it doesn't mean that the rabbit wins. Key distinction. The tortoise actually won, meaning the tortoise got to the desired outcome before the rabbit. The rabbit just did a bunch of things really fast, but didn't actually get to the outcome that it wanted. This goes back to the scoreboard. So that idea of like really paying attention to what am I actually trying to make happen, and then don't be like the rabbit who get really excited because they start fast. I don't want to start fast. I want to win fast or slow. I don't even care. I just want to win first. And you get into life stuff, and then it's not about winning first. It's not about beating, but it's like the tortoise actually won, and he was slower, but he still actually won. So anyway, all right, I'll stop talking now.
Well, Brad, it's been a pleasure having you here. Thanks for taking time out of your schedule, all the things you're up to come be a part of this. I look forward to having multiple conversations if you're willing to come back. So.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us on The Intentional Way. I'm Bryan Hatch, and it's been a true privilege to share this time with you. If today's episode has inspired you in any way, shape, or form, please subscribe, follow, and download our episodes. Your support not only helps us grow, it also enables us to bring more insightful conversations and exceptional guests right to you. Living intentionally begins with a single step, yours. So let's make the most of it. Until next time, seek intention by being completely present.